All right, give me 1 second for more people to join. All right, so welcome everyone to our first TAM webinar of 2023. My name is Matt Hardy. I'm the Senior Program Director for Planning and Performance Management here at AASHTO, and welcome to webinar 61 in our Transportation Asset Webinar Series sponsored by FHWA and AASHTO. The topic of today's webinar is TAM Innovations. We have presented webinars in this series every 2 months, going back to 2012 on a variety of topics related to asset management. For more information on this webinar series, visit tam-portal.com, tam-portal.com. From there, click Events in the main menu to register for any of the webinars. And you will also find archives of previous webinars going back to 2012, and links to video and slides from today's webinar will be posted on the site later on today or first thing tomorrow. So the TAM Portal is the home of AASHTO's Subcommittee on Asset Management, and the subcommittee. Visit TAM, again, tam-portal.com, click on Subcommittee on Asset Management under the Community menu to find out more about the Subcommittee on Asset Management. If you have any suggestions on future webinar topics or have any questions for the presenters during today's webinar, please submit those using the Zoom chat functionality, and we will sort of catalog those and at the end take those in order. So and we'll be answering questions and everything at the end of the webinar once we get through all the different presenters. Time permitting, if you're not able to type them in, or if you want to verbally say your question, we'll try to have time for that. If that's the case, please unmute your microphone on Zoom. And you'll be able to speak or say your question. And if you haven't already done so, but you should have, as you came in, everybody was muted, please don't forget to mute your audio so that we are respectful of the presenters. And with that, I think those are all the logistics. Let me turn it over to my good friend from FHWA, Tasha Clements, one of our very important partners in this. So Tasha, all yours.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you, Matt. Hello, everyone. I'm Tasha Clements with the Federal Highway Administration, representing the Office of Infrastructure, the Asset Management team. I'm glad to be able to share this welcome with you today on behalf of FHWA, a proud sponsor of this webinar series along with AASHTO. By offering these webinar series, we feel this is a great opportunity to bring people together around a series of important topics and to connect with the asset management community. We have 4 excellent presentations on the agenda to share with you today. With this webinar, TAM Innovations, we have reached the 61st webinar in our series. The asset management team within FHWA is highlighting how TAM innovations are being used to improve asset management decision-making. And today's webinar is an important platform for us to use to share these emerging technologies with you. I encourage you to visit us online for more information. You can do so by using the address shown on the screen. And finally, I just want to say that you are going to enjoy today's presentations. Thank you for the chance to welcome you all today. And now I would like to turn it over to Hyana Park of Spy Pond Partners to provide an overview of today's webinar, today's reviews agenda, and to introduce our speakers. Hyana?
Thank you, Tasha. As Matt mentioned previously, the purpose of the webinar series is to share lessons learned, ideas, and knowledge with the asset management community. For this webinar, the primary learning objectives are getting the word out on the latest TAM innovations taking place across DOTs, exchanging how-tos for practices related to the TAM innovations that will be shared, and raising awareness about how innovation is a catalyst for unlocking TAM progress at your organization. And of course, share lessons learned, ideas, and knowledge. For the agenda today, we'll start off by hearing from Matt. We started off by hearing from Matt and Tasha. Then I will introduce our speakers before each presentation, but in brief, For our first presentation, we will hear from Justin Bruner about PennDOT's open source TAM systems. Next, we'll hear about MnDOT's TAM strategic implementation plan from Trisha Stefanski. Then we'll hear about UDOT's use of NCHRP research products with a presentation from Chris Whipple. And for our final presentation, we'll hear from Mike Johnson from Caltrans, who will share how they are using TAM to improve safety. We'll end with a Q&A, and just a friendly reminder, please submit your comments or questions using the chat function on Zoom. And then you can do that throughout the entire presentation, and we'll take questions. The first ones in will get responded first. And then as you all, I think, do know, we'll have the slides and the video available after today's webinar at tam-portal.com. And then just a final note to our presenters, in order to keep things moving along on schedule, I'm going to chime in and remind you a little before the end of your time slot if we're getting tight on time. We have 4 speakers, so we may need to invoke that. So our first presentation today is from Justin Bruner, who's not able to be with us today, so he's pre-recorded his presentation. Justin serves as both the TAM and the Bridge Asset Management lead at the Pennsylvania Department of Transportation. Now let's watch Justin's presentation. Whoops.
Hello, I'm Justin Bruner, PennDOT's Asset Management Engineer, and today we're going to talk about TAM Innovations. So, I'm sure you've all heard the phrase, necessity is the mother of innovation, right? It's from Plato, the Greek philosopher. He's a great guy. I'm not a really big Plato fan, but I actually like his original Greek translation of his work, and I think it was called The Republic. But anyway, it's our needs is the real creator. I think that actually works well into what we're talking about here. We're talking about the needs creating the solution. So as DOTs, we all have needs, PennDOT especially. Let's talk about those PennDOT needs, right? We need accurate and reliable prediction of future funding needs. We need to connect federal performance metrics to asset investment levels. We need to align our project scope with metrics and safety, engineering, fiscal needs. We need to create smarter projects that combine needs, create less disruption, and are more financially efficient, right? These are the overarching needs of our DOT and probably every other DOT out there, right? And they all sort of focus around that financial element. So how do we address these, right? By breaking down the silos of management and information, providing actionable intelligence for business leaders. Well, what does that really mean? Well, it means extracting the data you have in your data warehouses and turning it into something really useful. But you can't do that on your own. You need systems to do that. So actionable intelligence. The benefits of utilizing it, right? Accurate funding assessments turn to transparent external conversations. So if you really talk about what you need, you can have this very transparent conversation with someone about getting more funding for your organization. Accurate condition forecasts, right? That lends to ensuring compliance. If you know you're not going to exceed a certain percentage threshold, then you know you'll be in compliance. Optimized project recommendations and achieving lower long-term costs. That's huge. Having less long-term costs means you get more projects done, and we all want that. And then meaningful metrics or key performance indicators means better business management. That means not managing on one specific attribute that someone's told you to look at, but managing on those real business drivers that are going to impact your long-term business performance. So how do we achieve actionable intelligence? Well, by operating business management systems from an open source ecosystem that can be completely customized to the end user's need. I realize that's a lot to say from a state DOT, but let's be honest. The only way to really get actionable intelligence with the myriad of systems that we have from all different manufacturers is to use an open source ecosystem that can cut through all of the different types and flavors of data, get it into one unified set and system so that you can use it and work with it to actually get information out of it. So at PennDOT, we have many OSS systems, but we're going to talk about the two key ones today. So we have OSS1, which we used to call IAM. We don't call it that anymore because apparently there's some copyright issues that we didn't know about earlier. So we're going to not refer to it as the name we just said and start calling it OSS until we come up with a better name. So, you know, hey, if anyone has any great ideas they want to put in the chat, that's super cool. I'll have Bill take that down and consider it in the future. But the reality is we have one system here, right? And this is OSS1. And it's the core system behind our BAMs and our PAMs, which exist currently, and then for any future system of WAMs, SAMs, or anything other asset category you want to manage as an inventory and condition. Fundamentally, this is your MODA, your multi-objective decision analysis engine. It allows you to do the basic functionality as required by 23 CFR 515. Now we also have an open source system too, which is Project Builder. So our open source system one, the BAMs and the PAMs and all these other things, right? They produce a recommended treatment per asset per year of analysis, which is very helpful and allows us to look at conditions into the future. But what it doesn't give us is actual projects. What we need to do is combine BAMs and PAMs outputs along with other stuff into Project Builder to align those things in time and actually get reliable, biddable projects that we can then utilize that information to make better financial decisions. So the sum of all of this is actionable intelligence. So let's talk more about that OSS1. So what does OSS1 do? How do I optimize within my asset class? That's the question and answers. So for our OSS1, it's multiple optimization options within that MODA system, right? So within that multi-objective decision analysis engine, you can do lowest lifecycle costs. You can do targets. You can look at worst first. You can do all those things. It provides your future condition and needs forecasts. It does constrained and unconstrained financial models. It gives you outputs of a treatment per asset per year. It's very important. Now, let's talk about this again. We have BAMs in the upper left and PAMs in the lower right. And what someone has to do every year to develop a tip is to look at those BAMs and PAMs recommendations and make projects out of them. So if you look in the upper right, we have project number 2344. It's State Route 1012 using BR Bridge 388. BAMs says that we should be doing Bridge 388 in year 2. PAMs says we should be doing State Route 1012 in year 8. The human has to figure out, can I move that treatment back in time for bridges? And for pavements, can I move that treatment forward in time? And is there enough money to move it back into year 6 where we think it will work? They have to do some investigating. They check it out and they say, yes, well, that's one project on the tip, you know, like 2,000 more to go. This takes forever. It's a lot of manual work. So this is why we're working on developing the overall Project Builder system. You can consume outputs from BAMs, PAMs, and any other system you want to build, put it in there, and it will automatically summarize, collate, and spit out a draft tip for you, with the goal being about an 85% complete draft. So that's super cool. So let's look at how this works a little bit more closely. BAMs and PAMs, they're very defined systems. They produce really good treatments that you can almost completely program off of. Still needs some human intervention, doesn't produce the exact right treatment every time, but is really, really good. So those treatments that are created, they're then spit out and consumed into Project Builder. Project Builder looks at where they are in time, just like that graph before, and creates a draft STIP. So that draft STIP, that first iteration of the STIP, it may only have 30% of the overall capacity utilized because you were trying to optimize the outputs of the BAMs, PAMs in time. So you now have to use those projects as committed projects, put them back into BAMs and PAMs, rerun BAMs and PAMs, now redump that information back into Project Builder, which then produces another STIP, which is now maybe 50% complete, and around you go until you get something that's usable for STIP building. So to sort of reference the upper right graphic, you don't know what you're going to start out with, right? You know you need a step, but you don't really know exactly what you're looking for. But if you do it like the lower cartoon there, where you build it in iterations, you get a much better product in the end that's likely to more reflect your overall needs than if you started out with this very rigid framework. So our open source system platforms, the current ones are BAMS, PAMs, and Project Builder. The advantages to this, it's super fast development and implementation time. Because it is open source, you don't have to go through process and procedure to modify anything. If you don't like the way something works, you can just change it. There's no process, there's no voting, right? Just go in there, yep, I don't like the way this prioritizes XYZ for reasons A, B, and C. It doesn't matter, you can change it. You have complete flexibility to adjust as implementation progresses. So you can have a very simplistic prioritization method at first. If you want to get to a much more advanced system that has a really sophisticated scoring system, you can do that, and you can implement it whenever you feel like. It gives you the ability to evolve with your tools, right? So as your bridge and management systems become more robust, you can then take advantage of that extra information you're getting sharing information between systems or using that in the overall overarching system, for us being Project Builder. And the ability to support individual business needs. So some areas may be more or less advanced than others. So some areas, they need some hand holding, or they don't have the technical expertise within that area to fully take advantage of everything you have. So what you can do is offer more automated systems for them. And for the people that are really advanced and know what they're doing, you can allow them to have access to the back of the house and let them change some variables on their own to see if they get a better output than you do. And that's great. That's all part of having this flexibility to have an open source system that meets your needs. So just as a sort of review of how this all works, here at PennDOT, we have very specific databases, right? They're homegrown databases. They're not open source, but we've built them ourselves. On top of that sits our BAMs and our PAMs and any other system we want to make. So they rely on an independent database. And then our PAMs and BAM systems provide us condition forecasting, financial needs, and business intelligence. So if any of you were at TRB this year, you probably saw me talking about this. Really, databases are the tractors of our organization, and our implements are the analysis tools. This is actually pretty important because there is a perception in our industry that it's all one, right? If you buy a Ford tractor, you need to buy a Ford plow, and that's not necessarily the case. So it turns out that our industry is a whole lot like the farming equipment industry of the 1940s, where there was tremendous advances in component level stuff. So some people made really great tractors, some people made really great planters, but in all, the industry really suffered because there was a trend for this sole source provider, which created vendor lock-in, right? So you couldn't use someone else's planter or plow because it didn't interface with your tractor. That was a real problem. So in the 1950s, the US saw this huge explosion in productivity of farming across the country. And it was largely linked to the expiration of patents and the adoption of the three-point hitch, right? So now you've allowed the best tractors to be mated to the best farming implements, increasing efficiency exponentially. Super great. And it's also what we should be considering here as DOTs, right? We need to think about where we're going with all these systems and make sure that we have flexibility built in for the long term, because eventually you're going to want to do something else with this data. And if your system provider doesn't do that, well, then you're kind of stuck and you're in that vendor lock-in. So anyway, here is our BAMs and PAMs. This is a shot of the BAMs version. We have branded our BAMs version Bridge Care. Unfortunately, no trademark issues with that either. And this is the old interface. I say old as in a week ago, or maybe 2 weeks ago. Looking at our security system, right? So this is what you see when you log in at first. This is a web-based interface that's enterprise level, so that means that everyone can have security and whatnot assigned to them. This is a screenshot of the latest and greatest interface that we have. This is our 3.0. We're actually quite proud of this. This is a again, the same core engine that TAMs uses, but this is the bridge version of this. So let me bring up the most key points. And that would be our menu on the side. So we're looking at, we can change our analysis method, we can change our investment strategy, we can change our deterioration models. We actually have a lot of deterioration stuff to talk about. We can talk about and change treatments and budget priorities, targets, deficiencies. We can look at remaining life calculations. We can look at how we cash flow project into the future, and we can put in committed projects, either one at a time or batch upload. So this is a full-on, complete, robust, enterprise-grade bridge asset management system. The outputs are messy. I don't expect you to read all this stuff, but the point being is that we manage 25,400 or so structures. We do a 12-year run. We get in a recommended treatment per structure per year. So the outputs, they're a lot. And by the way, the pavements are even worse because I think we're managing 100,000 sections. But the point is that in those output files, we have 22 tabs in total, 9 unique charts, 3 financial analysis tabs that are just chock full of information on how you're financing your projects, and then 1 unfunded treatment page. So the things that could have been treated, but you didn't do it because you didn't have enough money. These are supported by our deterioration modeling and our treatment and consequence documents. These are not insignificant documents. We update these every year. They're well over 100 pages, and it took us a long time to get to this point. Just as a quick point of reference, here's a quick screenshot of our treatment and consequence just for one activity. So that flow chart on the left needs translated to these incredibly lengthy if-then statements. It's messy, it's a lot of work to maintain these, but this is why our outputs are as accurate as they are. We put a lot of effort into our treatments, our consequences, and our deterioration modeling. So Project Builder, this answers the question, how do I optimize the program, right? So it's a very iterative process, like I noted before. It incorporates factors for equity and safety and mobility and all those other things that you want to try to utilize in your overall project selection, but are having difficulty with because it's hard to score. Well, with Project Builder, you can actually do that. And the outputs are 85% draft complete projects. Again, back to that concept that it is iterative in that Project Builder relies on outputs from BAMs and PAMs to make a draft STIP. And that first draft STIP is not the final draft STIP. Round and round you'll go, many, many iterations until you get one done. But we're talking weeks, not months or years, right? So you can probably, depending on your efficiency, build a STIP. Here in the state, I think we can get one done in about, well, if we're being honest, about 3 weeks. So the good thing about Project Builder and its ability to weigh other things besides the bridge and pavement alignment is that you can start to add value to other things that a project would create. So if you can figure out a way to score something, you can figure out a way to rate it. And by integrating that in with the bridge and pavement optimization, you can now look at not only just efficiency of projects, like, hey, am I using these projects or this money in an efficient manner, but what does this do to, say, travel time or job access or bridges in good condition, right? So that's really actually a really great feature to have that we haven't seen before. So here's a couple quick screenshots of Project Builder. This is our 1.0 beta release. So this is a desktop version. We're currently in the midst of having this converted over to a web version. But as you can see, you can import our BAMs and PAMs stuff. And very similarly to BAMs and PAMs, we have our menu on the side, look at treatments, look at those specific treatments that are being ingested into the system. Now you can run the scenario, and here's where the the dials are, if you will. Here's where the magic happens. This is where we spend all of our time trying to figure out how to incorporate and create projects. So there's a bunch of different variables that go on here, and they all different processes happen in different places. So you have to account for that. That's really some of the work we're doing now, is try to reflect that local preference in the overall outputs. Here's a nice view of some of the projects that are being ingested into this, right? So it shows you what's happening. This, you can see this was a bridge run. It's looking at that county maintenance deck work that was brought in here. And then of course we have summary outputs, not again too dissimilar from BAMs and PAMs, and then we can show the overall financial need per year, look at the potential benefits per year. So you can, if you can measure it, you can rate it. Again, look at your expenditures per year. So this is all really great stuff. Again, we're moving to get this to a web-based version, and in doing so, would get us to some GIS capability, which include mapping here, so we can look at each project per year on the map to make sure that everything is aligning and don't have any conflicts. So in terms of an implementation status, BAMS is in production as of today. Our latest 3.0 release was put on the servers this afternoon. We expect PAMS to be out on our servers here in the coming, I would say, 6 weeks or so. Realistically, looking at a, say, April project builder date to have the initial desktop version converted over to a web-based application, and then adding all the additional features and bits. We're really looking to have everything done, complete on PennDOT servers and accessible to the planning partners, internal and external stakeholders by June of this year. So we're pretty excited to get all this up and running. So in closing, systems are good, constrained and optimized outputs are great, but there's no substitute for complex human thought. These are tools to help guide the people in project selection, not a replacement for the person. But this does open up the discussion on utilization. So how do we plan to utilize such powerful information? Well, I think it's pretty simple. DOTs still need flexibility, and there's a multitude of data points that go into project creation and selection that these systems can't ingest. So you're always going to have the person. But what they can do is provide a recommended investment level by work type that we feel is a pretty good compromise. And finally, big shout out to Larry Shiflett. He's the Deputy Secretary for Planning. Larry saw my vision, believes in the team, and this would not have happened without him. So I'm going to say thanks for that. Okay.
All right. Thanks for that, Justin. Our next presentation is from Trisha Stefanski of the Minnesota DOT. Trisha currently serves as the Asset Management Office Director for MnDOT, and she has over 15 years of transportation engineering experience. Now let's turn it over to Trisha.
Thank you so much, Hayana. Let me see if my share screen will work. Do you guys want my notes or do you want the big screen? How about this one?
I think the big screen is good. Yeah, that's perfect.
Okay. So what a great presentation. I'm just going to switch gears a little bit. And when Hayana asked me to talk about innovation in a plan, I was thinking, oh, how do we get innovation into a plan? But you know what, this was much more than just a plan. And I think that is the way that you want to go about it. So the first thing that you see here, and I think this is supposed to move. There we go. Cool. I did not do that. The first thing you see here is it's not just a strategic plan, but it's a strategic implementation plan. And that was done on purpose. And when I talk through this, you'll see why. This plan was basically formally adopted through senior leadership. My predecessor, Dave Solsrud, tried to get an asset management policy in place. And this actually became the policy instead of some language. So this is another way, I think, to get some changes in your agency if you're looking for that for asset management. The journey begins. And I think about the group of people we have today watching and how smart and wonderful you are and how you know MAP 21 already. But one thing that I found in some of my notes is that, you know, it's not just about requirements or state statute language as much as saying we need to implement, we need to take action as an agency. And so I think that, you know, it's not something we always talk about, but it's something that we want to do. So in 2015, I was lucky enough to be asked to be a part of our asset management program office, a proposal that was put together. And one kind of cool thing that has lasted for us is having 3-minute folks embedded in our office. So keeping those IT people close to you, your enemies closer is what they say, right? keeping those people close to us, because there seems to be a lot of innovation and in technology and a lot of things happening. 2019, we did this TAMP workshop in this beautiful revenue building. Some of us on here will remember that, and really said, what do we need to do better? What do we need to do more of? We need to look at long range planning. We need to look at what assets we have in our TAMP. Minnesota's a little bit different. William and I have talked about this from Colorado. We include a lot of assets currently in our TAMP. Other states do not. So what is that? You know, what assets do I include? What are some of our preventive maintenance barriers? Why are we not focusing on preventive maintenance? Resource concerns, responsibilities, roles, and then use of the data. So those are some themes that kind of came out of this workshop that was put together, as well as our I always say this, I don't know why, but our Minnesota government is very interested in asset management. So we actually have state statute that we need to meet. You can see I wrote it, I guess there's an exclamation point at the end, specifically saying, look, we have to do this, but calling out, you know, what we must inventory within our transportation system. And then this actually has been added to with additional language on life cycle planning, corridor risk assessment. And one of my colleagues today was in front of the legislature as they were asking about Michigan and MnDOT, or Minnesota, sorry, not MnDOT specifically, but asset management. So just a matter of time. These are the things. So the next thing to do with any plan, and what we did, and I apologize, this kind of keeps coming down, but engage the dream team. So we had the legend, Tim Henkel. Gene Wallace is still at the agency. Dave Sulzer retired. We have wonderful Spy Pond partners, AP Tech, people with lots of vision, people that weren't afraid to make mistakes. Our MnDOT leaders, we engaged leadership in every one of these teams that I'll talk about and show you. On my team specifically, there was like one division director, 2 district engineers, and I told my boss, like, really, do you really want me to lead this team? I mean, it was really big decision makers. And then of course our asset management program office, as well as our planning office support. So those are some words. I don't need to describe to you necessarily what innovation is or what it means, but I think really, you know, I'm going to hone in on some of those words and those things within our asset management AMSIP. So the first thing that, or you know, besides this dream team that we had, we created a strong vision, brought everyone together, kind of talked about, you know, what is the mission, what is the vision, and wrote out the vision statement, as well as looking at the strategic objectives. This would probably be any part, I would say, of any good plan, you know, is to do this, make sure you have your mission, your vision, and then as well as the objectives. So use data effectively, improve trade-off evaluation, and integrate asset management into MnDOT's culture. And I do hear from several of our cohorts that it's really hard to do that, to get, you have maybe the pavement and bridge asset management integrated, but we're talking about whole culture integration and institutionalization of asset management. So those are the things that we focused on within this plan. Whoops, 2 slides. These are the pillars of excellence. So these were the 5 working groups that we focused on. Again, thinking about, you know, your agency and what would your focus be? I'm sure it would probably be different, maybe somewhat similar to MnDOT's, but really we wanted to look at the asset data in what we called the matrix, and you'll understand that more as I go. The geotechnical assets, pavement preservation, which is so important, TAMP, and then communications. And I think it's really cool because we looked at the data, the systems, the processes, and the people. What are the challenges? What are the barriers? And then how can we kind of move forward in those spots? So this is the one that was near and dear to me. This is the one that I chaired. This is the one where I had 3 months of weekly meetings with PowerPoints and really great engagement. I actually gave the district engineers and the folks on my team homework to do, which I think was, I had a lot of gumption to do that, but it turned out rather well. This was a long, wonderful process. Brad and I did not know the end where we were going to go with this until we kind of worked through it. So that was the process itself, I say, was really innovative. You can see some of this in like the TAM guide, but really to implement it for MnDOT was a big ask and a big load. So 72 asset classes, people kind of quote us on that. I think now we're at 78, really identifying those asset classes, looking at how we manage the asset classes across the agency. What is our desired approach? Pavement and bridge are managed in a condition plus. That means basically that we want to get all the condition data. We want to get the inventory data. We want to model deterioration. That's kind of the top of the line assets as far as condition. Cyclical was kind of like more of these electrical assets. Sometimes we're going to get condition and sometimes we're not. So we looked at these different maintenance approaches and how we wanted to maintain every asset class. And what did that mean when it came to data collection? And what were the mandates, the drivers? Where's that risk on each asset class? And you know, the end result of this was to determine what data we're going to get, how we're going to get it, as well as what was the return on investment, which we did for culverts. And then, you know, really prioritizing what we're going to do and what we're not going to do. That was a big one. What are we not going to do? How are we going to right size some of this? So lots to this that I can't even, you know, this is a whole nother, I probably did this, I probably did this presentation. You can probably find it, you know, online, but a lot to this group, and just the process itself was really innovative. And we have this wonderful spreadsheet. Let me just go to the next slide. We have this super spreadsheet, I'm calling it. It's like a super spreader spreadsheet that has all the information in it, all the assumptions. Again, a shout out to Michael Kremen, all the work he did. So we have a summary of, and you can kind of see it here, what the asset class is, what the tier, where it ended up for a tier. I didn't even mention that, but we tiered the assets to an importance, that asset management approach. What are we going to be doing to the asset? Are we adding? And I think if I click, yeah, I have more arrows for you. What are we doing on the baseline inventory, the blue boxes, and what is the cost? We had to estimate cost. What do we need to do to keep it up to date on the inventory side? And then what about condition data? Are we going to get condition data? Where did it fall? Do we want condition data? And then what is the cost to get that condition data up to date? And what's the best process? So all of this in one super spreadsheet that we maintain. Some priority outcomes that I think are innovative here is we're really going to focus on mainline culvert data collection efforts. We're going to do inspection on corridors and pick up all the culverts that we can find. We think we'll be able to get all the culverts into our system in the next 5 years. We have a innovative remote sensing project. Again, these probably are topics I could do on their own standalone, but this remote sensing project is awesome. LiDAR has always been a great solution to collect data very quickly. So we're updating half the state's inventory. You can see this really cool image here of LiDAR, and that's only improving. You know, artificial intelligence, the auto population of asset data is only going to continue to improve. And then do annual remote sensing projects to upgrade that, update that data, use conflation to get it back into our system, and then really moving to building information / asset information modeling. The next group, sorry, again, if I move my cursor, maybe it will not, okay. I don't know, geotechnical assets. And so this was something brand new to us. Other agencies, I don't think there's a lot that's happened here, but other agencies might have this already. We did asset classifications. You can see on the right, those classifications that were identified as geotechnical assets. You know, what does it even mean in state statute? They basically said, collect, please. There was no please, but I know they meant it. Please collect geotechnical assets. Well, what does that mean? So this group really focused on what does that mean? What is the maintenance approach? What data is needed? And then we did a cool, we called it the GAM tool. We made just an ArcGIS online tool using GIS and went out and did district visits and asked the maintenance and other folks, pavement folks, to put the data into this tool and tell us where these assets are. And it took a little pushing, but really actually crowdsourcing this method was a good way to get a good start, I think, on that baseline inventory. Design plan extraction, we're doing that as well. And then we have as-built specs for inventory, as well as now our TAMs is being configured to hold the geotechnical assets.
Hey, Trisha, if
yep.
you could finish in 2 minutes, that would be
Sure.
great.
Okay. Yep. So our last two, pavement preservation, really barriers here, but we looked at solutions. So performance measures, a whole suite of performance measures were developed. We want to work on formalizing the performance measure programming process. You can see some of those items included there, really highlighting preventive maintenance and performance measures, and then communicate out on a web. And I'm going to talk about that with the communication slide. The asset management plan, how do we know what to put for additional assets in the TAMP? We actually have 10 asset classes within our TAMP. So if that interests you, please go look at the MnDOT TAMP that's out there. Look at ways we can improve usability. We're going to be doing some folios. So those are really cool, folios online. And you can kind of see building processes in place to ensure consistency with our MnShip. Those sorts of things. And then this is my last slide, Hayana. So the last innovation, again, there's a lot here. I apologize for going so quickly, but is really communication. And so we go out onto your browser and do MnDOT TAM Portal. And you will find this portal of information that has a lot of great stuff that different agencies can use, including our entire AMSIP, flyers for individual folks within your agency. So this was a really important piece going from strategy to implementation. And that's it. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you, Trisha. And I was confused on my time. You actually did less than 15 minutes, so that's
okay. Great.
All right, thank you.
Thanks.
All right, our next presentation is from Chris Whipple of Utah DOT. Chris is currently serving as the statewide asset manager for Utah DOT, and he also has 15 years of combined engineering experience. I will turn it over to Chris.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, just a couple things. Trish, thank you for presenting that. I do go to Minnesota's TAM portal quite often and blatantly use a lot of your information. So I appreciate you producing it. And then, to go back to what Justin said, that's an awesome tool. That was one of the things that we looked at a lot through kind of our process and where we are at in that process. So a couple things that maybe just some high level. If I can get mine to actually present, and we should be good. There we go. Okay, so hopefully, yeah, you can see that presentation, yeah? Okay. There we go. Okay, so let me tell you a little bit about Utah, just to give you a size and a reference to where we are at. Those are just some general statistics, nothing super fancy, but yeah, we aren't the biggest state in the country for sure. We do have a lot of land area, but not a whole lot of people. And so a lot of things that we work on, one of our biggest challenges is that nation's fastest growing state from 2010 to 2020. I think we're number 2 or 3 now. I know Idaho is growing faster than we are, which is kind of good. We have a very rapidly expanding population and system. So just a high level again. At UDOT, with all of that, we have, I think the actual number is just, we've broken 1,800 employees. So we have just somewhere in that region. We have about 49,000 centerline lane miles. We have about 58.5 billion roadway assets in roadway assets. And I laughed because I heard Justin's number for PennDOT's number of bridges, because that's somebody we have. So that we're responsible for. Those are our state managed bridges. So definitely a little bit smaller. So process-wise, oh, sorry, let me step back. So UDOT's broken into 4 regions. So we have 4 regions. They're primarily by population. Region 2 is our Salt Lake. That's our largest region by population. Region 1 is next. Region 3 it follows that. And Region 4 is actually our largest region, but it has the smallest population, but the most lane miles. So they have different challenges. It's a lot more rural. Yeah, in terms of asset management, we have a grand total of 2 staff members. One of them does primarily functional classification. The other is me. So yeah, definitely. When I watch any of these webinars, I get a little bit of anxiety because I would love to have what you have, but that's where we are, and so we push things forward with what we have, and I love to see how well we do that. Okay, so just to jump into what we did. So a couple of definitions. I like the English language. Data management in general it covers 11 areas. If you look at the data management or DAMA International, they define data management into 3 subcategories. The biggest of those being data governance. I'll get to why this is important here in a minute. Data governance itself is, you can see the definition there, but it's kind of the core component of data management. It ties everything together. It's actually how everything else interacts. When talking about data governance, most people are on board when you start talking about that, until we start to ask them to work collaboratively across different business units, and then it's another story. So that's one of the things, just a couple things to kind of put out there before I tell you kind of our journey. This right here is just kind of showing how data management and data governance differ and how they overlap. And I won't spend too much time on this, just so you know there is some overlap and there are generally some confusion when you talk about these 2 terms. So for this presentation, I want to refer to our individual efforts with asset stewards as data management, and then our efforts at our enterprise level as data governance. So just keep that in mind. As I talk about data management, I'm talking specifically with our asset stewards. I really like this quote because a lot of times we talk about, why do we need all this data? What do we need information? In fact, the question commonly comes up, what is data? When you say data, what are you talking about? And it's really anything that we're gathering and analyzing to help us make better decisions. Data really comes down to trust. Data management comes down to trust. We have to trust that the data that we're collecting and analyzing is accurate. We have to trust that it's being stored and maintained. We have to trust that the data is being analyzed and reported accurately and correctly. So these are all Utah pictures, by the way, so I'd like to highlight that. But so the way UDOT is set up currently, we're actually looking at just some minor modifications in the way we do things. We have 3 tiers. Tier 1 is our condition-based, Tier 2 is our interval-based, and Tier 3 is our reactive-based. And you'll notice those are more maintenance strategies. And we, like I said, this is where we're revising this and actually taking a lot from some of the other folks that have been doing this longer. One thing that you'll recognize with the actual asset management framework from the TAM guide, we pulled this in, and I meet with each one of our asset stewards every month. just to sit down and go through some of the processes, some of the pain points, how we can help, and some of the bigger, broader developments that we're working on to really integrate asset management into the department as a whole. So we go over a lot of these things quite often. As I met with them, I actually ended up kind of giving everybody a grade on each one of these areas. The one that was the most efficient, we have lots of data, we just don't manage it very well. And so our information systems, I gave it a 10% out of 100. So really wasn't too high on our list. And I think that's pretty common for a lot of agencies where, you know, we're used to building things, we're used to designing, building, and then, you know, maintaining. And other than that, there isn't a whole lot that we do. And so one of the things I started looking at ways to really establish a baseline, and then, you know, where do we go with data management? And fortunately for me, I found the ASTO TAM data guide. This has been kind of my holy grail of focus here. I'm always trying to make this work. But it was really, really neat. For those who haven't jumped into it and seen what it does, I encourage you to jump in there because it really helps establish a baseline and direction. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the process that I went through with our asset stewards and our data stewards across the department. We jumped in, there's 5 separate areas. I'll show you, this is probably a little more descriptive, but I try not to show this graphic too often to certain groups because they get a little overwhelmed, but this is the 5 different areas broken into all their different elements that we need to ask folks. So there's 51 questions and there's levels associated with each one of these. So we have a current level, and then we have a desired level. So from 0 to 4. So what I did is I actually sat down with each one of our asset stewards. For pavement and bridge, we went through the entire assessment. So I did all 51 questions with both of them. The process itself was 4 1.5-hour sessions. And so it was a little intense for them. And in fact, I really, really appreciate their efforts to endure that with me. For the other asset groups, or the rest of our tier 1s and tier 2 assets, so the remaining 7, we just went through the first 2 areas. So specify and standardize and collect. We did not go into the other 3 just yet, just because of their maturity in data management and asset management as a whole. Although some definitely are more mature than others. So give you just a screenshot of what that assessment looks like. So what you would do is you would sit down with each one of these groups. I would pull up, you know, the first area. I would say standardized asset categories, component breakdowns, and core attributes. The wording is extremely descriptive. For these groups, I had to kind of put it into plain English and help them understand what that meant in context of their asset. And so for each one of these, we would step through their benchmark levels. We determine a current level and a desired level. I did have to help with some of those desired levels so they could see kind of that bigger, broader picture for the department as a whole. And then what I like, and I'm just showing one category of improvement, but they had kind of pre-selected improvements that you could do for each one of those. And so I'd go through and I'd select those. And then you can also add benchmark level notes and initial improvement notes. And so I would define where they're at and some of the challenges they have, and then how this improvement actually applies to them. So this is all, it's a web-based, it's actually really nice. One of the challenges we did have, which is access, rather than give all of these asset stewards permission and have them all jump in and do the assessment themselves. I chose to sit down with them and walk through it. And then we just had one assessment. It was kind of the culmination of everyone else's views. Now, once I got through all of those assessments over the course of a couple months, I actually exported all of those, which is another functionality of that tool. I pulled them into Excel or Google Sheets. We're a Google company. And so we pulled these in, and then I started capturing. Well, these are actually in the tool itself. I exported them so that we could post this, and then they can actually use it without having to log into the tool itself. And so what I really like is with each one of these improvements, you can identify the impact, the effort, and the priority. And so each one of these groups did that for every improvement. And we captured those in a giant spreadsheet. And then I also recreated the radar charts. Again, so it was all in one place, and we could compare everyone to each other and kind of see where the overlap was. And so this is just a screenshot of the spreadsheet that I created that allows us to see, blue where you are and orange, UDOT colors, orange where you would like to be. So that's your desired level and your current level. And we do that for each one of the assets. And this one is not just for fun rainbow colors. What I was doing was identifying the gaps. So the cooler the color, the smaller the gap was from where they are and where they want to be. The warmer the color, the bigger that gap is. And so for each one of these assets, I captured all of their assessments and then just visually help them understand where are the areas that we need to work on, where are those improvements we need to make. And then I took that and I actually pulled this into, I've been pulling these assessments into several different areas. Prior to this is how we define peers. We just had inventory, condition, deterioration, life cycle. I connected the questions that were in the data assessments to how we had been categorizing them in our tiers. So without having to know too much, that's essentially how mature they are in each one of these areas, these percentages. If I did not do those assessments, it was based on just my interactions with each one of these groups. So this was a way that I was able to help our senior leadership understand why data was so important and what these assessments were actually telling us. And so between this and these previous spreadsheet screenshots, that's how I communicated with them and gave them just an idea of what was needed. Okay, just some quick insights. The largest gaps that we found were in data governance, data integration and access, data analysis, and data informed decision making, which I guess if you sum that up, it's pretty much all of them needed work. So what I decided to do was to focus on data governance and data management so that we could move the rest of those along. Another takeaway that we got there is that increased regulation comes dedicated funding. So I love to see what other DOTs have done, and honestly, a lot of it is because their legislature was in support of it, and they mandated that this needs to be done. Utah, the state of Utah has not done that yet, and I would rather us push this forward before they get in and tell us how to do it. But that's kind of where we're at, and that is a general view of that regulation. So the other thing that the takeaway is that if we can find that method to connect the data to risk management, that's where our success is going to be. We want to associate the assets with how their data and the risk is managed. And so we're starting to find connections to that data management and the risks and how they're maintained. I mean, everything comes down to that data. So Again, kind of our next steps. This is actually what we're doing right now. We have two consultant teams on board to do data management and data governance. Both of those will be complete by the end of this year, more or less, this calendar year. And what we are focusing on is just establishing a data governance framework. So how data is connected, what kind of policies and procedures need to be in place. And then on top of that, that data management side of things, we're working with each one of the asset stewards. So we're focusing primarily on assets right now, and then eventually that will be expanded to the rest of the data in the department. We felt like instead of eating the whole elephant, we should take some pieces. So that's where we are with that. Part of those tasks or those outcomes is that we're going to quantify the resources necessary to close all those data management gaps. We're also going to be looking at, do I need to stop here soon, Hayena? Okay. Yeah, no, we're looking at how each one of these groups interact and establish some of those processes so they can move things forward. Yeah, right. It's just to finish with that. Really, we need to have that plan, and I love that Trish pointed that out, is that we have a strategic implementation plan. We are actually in the process of doing the same thing. And again, the focus is on that data and how it's structured and used. So thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Our final presentation is from Mike Johnson of Caltrans. Mike has a long history of transportation engineering experience at Caltrans, and he currently serves as a state asset management engineer, leading Caltrans's TAM effort. And I'll turn it over to Mike.
Thanks, Yana. So I guess I get to round out the cornucopia of innovation topics, and apologize for the whiplash, but this is going to be quite a bit different than data governance and looking at your program. We in Caltrans have been looking at and actually implemented some kind of a combination of asset management and safety improvement. And so I thought this was a good topic for an innovation webinar, because there are opportunities, I think, to take the asset management concepts, just beyond pavements and bridges. And in fact, in California, we do a very similar approach for a number of operational areas. So just to kind of get everybody on the same page and to put this in a context that everyone will understand, when we think about something like pavement, so here's a physical asset we can go and touch, and we can measure its condition today. And all agencies are doing this in one form or the other. And all agencies are required to have targets established. And those targets are part of your asset management plan. If it's pavement and bridge, they're required to. Maybe you heard from Trish, they had others. But the concept is you have a starting place, you have a finish line. And the way I describe this in California is it's, we're running a race, and we need to know, is the race a sprint or is it a marathon? And the way we figure that out is we analyze this gap between where we are and where we want to be. And once we understand how big that gap is, we know what kind of race we're running. And in the case of asset management, we can cost out that race by looking at that performance gap, applying some unit costs, and we could say, okay, to get to our pavement condition, it's going to take X, millions or billions of dollars in my case. So what would happen if we did this in a safety context? And so to kind of prove how potentially valuable this is, I'm going to walk you through a series of slides, and they're labeled our SHOT, which is our 4-year programming commitment from our commission. And the graphic that's shown is every single pavement job that we had in our 4-year plan in 2016. And they are sorted in such a way that the percentage of good, fair, and poor pavement that each project was expected to have at the time of award is shown. And so you can see there's a lot of good pavement that was being worked on. In fact, it was 27.5%. And that's not great. And you may say, well, why are you working on good pavement? Sometimes, you know, as you're doing a long pavement job, you're gonna pave pavement that's in different conditions. And in some cases, it's unavoidable. But if we really start focusing in on the performance, we're spending money to fix pavement, and in some cases that pavement was good. So we really started honing in and focusing on the performance. So when we went into our 2018 plan, we had cut this down to 20.3%. That was only 2 years later. It took a while for these new policies to kick in. By 2020, we had it down to 9.4%, and we just did our 2022 plan, and now it's down to 7.1%. So by focusing in this case on how much we were spending in terms of our pavement budget, if you will, on fixing good pavement, we were really able to make significant improvement in reducing this. The fiscal impact of this is a 20.4% reduction from 2016 to 2022 plans. That equates to $1.8 billion, okay, 1.8 billion. And so by becoming more efficient in this context, we had, in our case, we've just been plowing it back into fixing more pavement, which means we're getting projects that are more effective, and we're seeing a pretty dramatic improvement in our pavement condition. So what if we could do this in a safety context? And so we started to have these conversations with our chief safety officer and others in Caltrans. And it really comes down to looking at a couple things, so what are the best investments we can make to lower fatalities and injuries? Where do we work to get the best safety outcomes? And are we investing enough to improve safety? And so those questions seem simple. The last one is really challenging. And I would challenge anybody in the webinar to get with your safety people and say, hey, how much do we need to spend to get to a certain fatal or serious injury performance level? And my guess is they'll look at you with blank stare. And so this is an area that in Caltrans, we've been doing a lot of work to develop the relationship between the investment and the performance in a safety context. So first and foremost, you can look at different safety treatments that you could consider and look at something called a crash modification factor or crash reduction factor. And you can see there are some really low cost, highly effective safety improvements like rumble strips in a case where you have people departing the roadway, high visibility crosswalks for some of our vulnerable road users, pedestrians, bicyclists, and then pedestrian beacons are also very effective at reducing fatal and serious injuries. So these are some of the treatments that would be attractive because they're low cost and high benefit. But what we did is we looked at our system. We looked across the entire state highway system, every route, every 10th mile segment, and we utilized some machine learning techniques to identify those segments within the overall system that had a greater weighted crash frequency. I don't have time to get into what all that means, but we were trying to identify segments that we consider, segments where we could get some significant safety value or high safety value by working in those segments. And from this work, we pulled out some trivia. I mean, it's significant, but you look at the entire system in California, about 17% of the segments accounted for more than 50% of the fatal and serious injuries. So you know, once you see that, you think, well, let's try to understand how much we're focusing in on these 17%. Not to say we're not working on the rest, but here's a minority of the system responsible for half of the fatal serious injuries crashes. So let's take a close look at these. So we started doing a lot of GIS work. And what's shown on this map are red, where we had these high value segments, and you can see they're kind of scattered around the state. Certainly in the major urban areas, there's, you know, concentrations. If you actually zoom in on these GIS maps, it's not, you know, solid. It looks solid at this scale. But then in the blue, the dark blue are projects that that we were doing that had proactive safety focus. And so what we were looking for was the alignment of where we were doing proactive safety projects relative to these high value segments. In other words, how often are we working in these segments? And then the blue that's the lighter colored with the dark edges is where we had proactive safety, what we call anchored projects, meaning the primary reason we're doing the project is for safety. And those had significantly better alignment with these high value segments. So that kind of looked at where we might invest on the system, right? So we looked at what treatments would be best. Then we looked at where could we apply those treatments to get the best bang for our buck. And then you get to this last question, are we investing enough to achieve our performance targets? So we all have performance management 1, TPM 1 safety targets. You know, if we look at how we do asset management with that, you know, we need to really focus on can we get there? And you know, I'd say it depends on where we work. It depends on what treatments we put in place, because we could put in less expensive high benefit treatments, or we could put in expensive lesser benefit treatments. And then it also depends on how much enforcement and education curbs behavior, because with safety driver behavior is part of the problem, and enforcement, you know, driving under the influence, distracted driving, other things. So how do we bring asset management into this? And, you know, I would joke with our safety officer that it's like a Reese's peanut butter cup, because we're bringing in chocolate and peanut butter, and we're making this great thing by mixing and merging asset management and safety. So we have this 5-step approach. We establish a unique fatal and serious injury reduction target for each one of our 12 districts. We provide funding to them to achieve those targets, providing they do it with cost-effective treatments. And then we objectively quantify how much benefit each project will impart relative to this performance target, which is measured in fatal and serious injury reduction. So how much each project will help us move towards that goal. And then we sum the safety accomplishments across all the projects in each district over a period of time, just to ensure that the districts meet the targets. And in California, they're required to. And we reassess this every 3 months. So once every quarter, we reassess all of their projects to make sure they're meeting all of the performance targets, not just the safety one, all of them. And we have 33 different areas that we require them to focus on. So to do this, we had to have a project level tool that would assess project level safety benefits. I don't have time to get into it, but fairly simple input. All the gray cells that you see are auto-populated. So our districts just simply put in the white cells, and it will come up with an annual fatal and serious injury reduction based on crash modification factors of the proposed treatments in the project limits that they've defined. So quick example, this was a legacy project that we had, bridge rail upgrade project. It was programmed $27 million. And then the rail's clearly not meeting current crash test standards by a lot, probably the last couple crash test standards, but it was a $27 million project. go through the calculator, the benefit of this work is 0.1 fatal and serious injuries avoided per year. So that's the safety benefit, if you will. And so the question that we've begun asking within Caltrans is, can we get better performance with that 27 million? In other words, if safety is our goal, is this the best place to do it? Or could we take that $27 million, for example, and install miles of shoulder rumble strips that have a much higher benefit, crash modification benefit than bridge rail upgrade does? So in other words, if we focus on the benefit and not on the dollars spent, we may come to a different conclusion about where to apply the funding. So I know this was fast, apologize for that, but Hyana's running a tight ship here. So in conclusion, we are in the midst, and we implemented this July 1, 2021, but we can already see the safety culture changing in Caltrans. Like, I go into project meetings and the meeting isn't about how much we're spending on safety anymore. Now the discussion is, how many fatal and serious injuries are we going to prevent or avoid? You know, what are those estimates? And I think as we focus on the performance, which is really exactly what TPM is doing. And so this is where kind of that asset management piece comes in. We're guiding safety decisions to high benefit, low cost safety treatments in many cases, not in all cases. There's certainly always exceptions to this. But then we're also looking at where on the system are we working? Are we working in high value locations, or are we looking at low value locations, or somewhere in between? Because the same treatment will have different benefits applied in different places on the system. And so one of the outcomes of this, after a year and a half now, we're seeing that the safety improvement costs are coming down, because there's this culture now that's striving for better performance at a lower cost. So as the improvement costs are coming down, we're actually able to get more performance with the same dollars. And we're optimistic that that over time, we're gonna see this have a similar effect to focusing on the performance that we saw with our pavement program. With that, I think I'm done with time. So thank you, Yana.
Thanks,
right.
Mike. I think Matt's taking over.
All right. Yes. Thanks, Mike. That was great. I will say, Mike, that your presentation, so at AASHTO, AASHTO is organizing. So one of Roger Millar's, well, his emphasis area talks about a resilient transportation system that is safe, smart, and sound. There's going to be a safety summit that we're organizing. It's going to take place in October of 2023. But one area that we want to emphasize is the overlap between safety and other areas. And I think this would be a great presentation, this topic where you overlap to sort of overlay the safety performance measures aspect with asset management. I think this is a great presentation, great insights. I think a lot of other states would probably enjoy hearing what Caltrans has done. So thank you very much for that. So we have finished up with the presentations. Speakers don't go away. It is an opportunity to sort of, for the audience, for the participants, to sort of ask your questions. So if you want to type it in, that would be great. If you want to raise your hand, I can call on you, and you can sort of unmute yourself and ask your question that way. But I think first, Hyana had a question that she wanted to ask Mike.
All right. Hey, can all of the panelists put your cameras on? I think that would also be nice. So I just had a question to kick off, Mike, that, what motivated you to look at that good pavement number? And then what are other things you're looking at? I mean, it looked really interesting, and it just made me think that, I haven't seen that metric being looked at by others in the same way. If you're thinking of other areas where, other than safety, just looking at this kind of efficiency and getting bigger bang for the buck.
Yeah, thanks. I would say we look across the spectrum at everything. Pavement was our first stop back in 2016 because it's the asset that commands the most funding on an annual basis. So I always say pavement's the whale in our program. You know, and so I like to fish. So I use a lot of fishing analogies. I say, let's fish where there's big fish. So we go after the big fish. As far as going to safety, our previous director, Director Almashokin, you know, really is passionate about safety. Not, you know, I mean, I'm sure all directors are passionate, but I mean, he's passionate down to his core, and really challenged a number of us to do better. We were looking at our fatal and serious numbers. They were going down a bit, and they started to spike up in 2021 when COVID hit, or 2020, 2021. And, you know, the message was what we're doing is not getting the kind of effect that he wanted. And so the challenge was think outside the box, do something different. And that's really what led to this focus on performance.
Great, thanks.
And Bill Robert is here to answer any questions on Justin's presentation.
Okay.
As
So
long as they don't have to do with tractors, because I don't know if I can answer that.
Okay, the 3-point hookup, that's not your thing. Let's so I guess I had a question for Trisha, just kind of going in perhaps a random order. I don't know. Again, if you have a question, type it in. I want to keep things going. So I know, Trisha, that at MnDOT you've gone through a number of different, you know, leadership changes over time, right? Since, you know, Tim was there and I was there. So had there been any issues? So you kind of talked about the overall asset management, you know, the implementation plan and everything. Have you noticed, are you concerned with, or anything that as leadership changes, how you communicate or maintain the importance of that over time? Or is that something that it's so, you know, kind of part of the organization that it's gonna be there for the future, regardless of what leader is at the top of the organization?
I love that question because I think things do ebb and flow, right? Depending on your leadership and what's important to your governor, what's important to our division directors. So right now, my boss's boss is really comes from sustainability and resiliency. So I've been able to, Matt, talk about that, you know, and weave that in to what asset management is. Just like Mike's talking about safety. Like, I think asset management really exists in so many parts of our organization. I just did a survey about TAM and equity. So what I feel like I'm just communicating. Really, that's like my job. 80% of my job right now is literally communicating what's in the AMSIP. And my boss, I say this to him, my other boss is new. I'm like, well, so do you think in 30 minutes a week when we talk to each other, I'll be able to explain my last 14 years at the agency? So it's really, you know, there's been a lot that's happened. There's been a lot that's happened, like with us, like you and Tim leaving, and, you know, just things change. So really just communication, I think, about what's important and how asset management can change. It probably never ends. At MnDOT, I am very lucky. I think we're institutionalized a bit. People understand. But if you go out to our TAM portal, one of the other things you'll see is just, why is asset management important to me? I'm a hydraulic engineer. I sit in hydraulics. Why is asset management important to me? So we did that for all different roles at MnDOT. And those, I think, have been really helpful in continuing that communication effort.
Great, thanks, Trisha. Maybe I'll throw that one to Chris as well. I mean, having, you know, at Utah, I know Carlos has been sort of a steady rock at Utah as the director and everything, but and Utah's done a lot when it comes to asset management. But your discussion about the data governance, and, you know, is there any concern about, as leadership changes, how do you kind of embed this within the organization so that as the leaders do change, it doesn't kind of go away or anything like that?
No, I mean, that's a super common topic. That's probably the biggest thing that we talk about on a daily basis, is creating that system so that it's independent of the people in that system, right? And one of the things that we've been able to do, just the way our asset management group is funded, it's through our SBR funds, which allows us a little more flexibility, so we aren't as tied to you know, some of the other groups and the way that they fund things. And so it's been really helpful for us to use those funds to get the resources. And that's why for us, we're starting in that foundational, data governance, data management stage, because if we get that in place, the rest of the organization and that TAM framework really falls into place. It's the systems built. And so that is what we focus on more than anything is building that system that's independent of those of us that are in it.
Okay. I have about 3:28 on my clock. I don't want to go over, but I know Justin, you probably can't answer this for Justin, Bill, but I know Justin kind of made mention at the end of his presentation with that Larry Shiflett was a very big believer and supporter of the work that Justin was doing. And I feel like that's going to sort of live on just given the overall, that product that they have. I don't know if you've talked to Justin about that at all, Bill, or any concerns there.
Well, I can provide a little perspective on that. I worked with PennDOT years and years ago when they were first in the early 2000s when they were updating their bridge management system. And I could say at that time, there was, they have a lot of bridges, they had a lot of bridge needs, there was a recognition of that, but were very much in a kind of worst first mindset about their bridges. Like their bridge program was a bridge replacement program. And now working with them, from what Justin's presented, but also what I've seen on some of the work we've done, they're very, very committed to a lowest practical life cycle cost approach, and very committed to preservation. And so I think that's part of what they've instituted in recent years through their asset management initiatives and in implementing these asset management systems. And so Larry really did help kind of push these systems forward. And it really has changed the mindset of the agency. You can see that. And so I think that's what Justin was referring to there.
Yeah. All right, great. Well, I got 3:30. So I want to thank all of our presenters. Justin, who wasn't here today, but got to present, Bill for standing in, Chris, Trisha, and then Mike Johnson. Thanks, Yana, for moderating. Tasha, do you have any closing remarks as our FHWA partner?
No, this was a great session. I think as we continue to move forward, we're going to continue to push for new and more innovative technologies. And I just enjoyed all of the presentations today. So thank you, everyone, for joining today. Thank you, Matt.
Oh, you're welcome, Tasha. Thanks for being a great partner. Just to sort of conclude, the next webinar is going to be April 19th at 2 p.m. Eastern. You can go to TAM Portal, tam-portal.com, and get all the information. We will be out with the titles and presenters shortly of that one, along with the other webinars in this sort of year. We do these every other month. Again, if you have any topics or ideas, or you want to share something with the community about what you're doing in your state, your agency, please let us know. We try to put our brains together and try to figure out what are some good presentations and how to sort of group those and organize them, but we would love to hear from you. And if you want to share something, my mantra, sharing is caring. We would love to hear from you and encourage you to sort of participate. Again, thanks a lot. Don't forget to visit TAM Portal early and often, maybe once a day. So we get get that portal going. With that, thanks everybody. Have a great rest of the week, great rest of the day. Stay safe. We'll talk with you next time. Bye.